Imagine the dust of the Colosseum floor clinging to your skin, the scent of sand, sweat and something metallic in the air. You're chained to a prop rock, a crude but recognisable stage piece in the very centre of the world's most infamous arena. You're dressed as the mythical titan Prometheus. But this is no mere play. The roar of 50,000 spectators is a physical force, a deafening tidal wave of anticipation that washes over you, chilling you to the bone, despite the blistering sun. This isn't just a performance. A heavy gate groans open, and from the shadowy depths, a Caledonian bear is released into the blinding light of the arena. It sees you. In the twisted, spectacular world of the Roman Games, this was considered high art. A state-sponsored execution, meticulously staged as a live-action myth, where your real, gruesome death is the unforgettable climax. What you probably think you know about the Roman arena, honourable gladiators exchanging blows, a simple thumbs up or thumbs down from a benevolent emperor, is a carefully sanitized Hollywood fantasy. The reality was infinitely more complex and infinitely more disturbing. The Colosseum and other arenas across the empire weren't just for sport. They were theatres of nightmares. Vast and sophisticated stages engineered to shock, terrify and entertain a population that was becoming dangerously desensitised to suffering. Much like a modern audience scrolling numbly past one tragic news story after another, the Roman people's threshold for horror kept getting higher, and the showrunners, the emperors, had to deliver. The shows went far beyond simple duels, diving into a realm of choreographed cruelty that's hard for us to even wrap our heads around today. We're about to descend into the hypogeum, the dark underbelly of Roman entertainment, and explore the acts that don't always make it into the history books. From criminals devoured by wild animals in staged hunts, to those grotesque mythological plays where the deaths were horrifically real. Before we descend into the darkness, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss any more of our deep dives into history's most shocking truths. When the morning's wild beast hunts, the Veneties, concluded, the arena didn't just break for lunch. Lunch was the entertainment. This was the time for Damatio and Bestias, condemning criminals to the beasts. This was one of the most feared and humiliating punishments in the Roman world. An execution reserved for the lowest members of society, escaped slaves, rebels, prisoners of war, and the hated enemies of the state. It was a raw, brutal and terrifyingly clear display of Roman power. The condemned were often pushed out into the hot midday sun with no weapons, no armour, and absolutely zero chance of survival. This wasn't about a fair fight. It was about demonstrating absolute dominance over man and nature. Some were tied to stakes, completely immobile. Others were tangled in nets to impede their movement, or even tied to the horns of enraged bulls, all to generate a slow, agonising and varied deaths for the crowd's perverse enjoyment. The sheer variety of the animals was a terrifying spectacle in itself, a living, breathing map of the empire's vast reach. Bears from across Europe, leopards from Anatolia, and lions from North Africa were all starved and provoked, then unleashed on the helpless condemned. Ancient writers described the scene in chilling detail. The sand, which was laid deep to soak up blood, would slowly transform into a thick red mud, like a painter's palette where the only colour was human suffering. The screams of the dying, desperate and raw, were completely swallowed by the ecstatic roar of the crowds. This wasn't just punishment. It was calculated political theatre on a grand scale. It sent a clear and visceral message to everyone watching, from the highest senators to the lowliest plebeian. This is what happens when you cross Rome. The horror of being torn apart by wild animals was a public service announcement written in blood, a visceral deterrent designed to maintain order through absolute terror. Roman cruelty was rarely simple. It was often highly theatrical, blurring the line between execution and performance until they were one and the same. The most shocking and creative examples were the fatal mythological reenactments, where condemned criminals were forced to act out the gruesome final moments of famous myths. The deaths weren't faked with stage blood. They were the grand, bloody finale of the show. It was like watching a blockbuster movie where the stunt performers were never meant to get up after the climactic explosion. Let's return to the man chained to the rock, playing Prometheus. In some versions of this horrifying execution, a prisoner was chained fast while a bear was released to maul him. A monstrous stand-in for the eagle that eternally devoured Prometheus' liver in the myth. For the audience, this transformed a brutal execution into a live-action story they all knew from childhood, adding a sickening layer of artistic appreciation to the abject horror. The myths they chose were without exception the most violent and agonising ones. A criminal might be dressed as Hercules, complete with a lion skin cloak, and placed on a massive funeral pyre to be burned alive for the cheering crowd. Another might be made to play Icarus, fitted with elaborate but useless fake wings, and then dropped from a great height in the arena to his death. A horribly literal and cynical take on the boy who flew too close to the sun. Suetonius even tells of one such Icarus who fell so close to Emperor Nero's private box that he splattered the emperor with his blood. Even the most sordid and depraved myths were brought to life. The poet Martial described a reenactment of the myth of Pasiphae, the queen who legend said hid inside a wooden cow to mate with a magnificent bull. In the arena, some historians believe a condemned woman was forced into a similar device with a real live animal to be publicly violated. It's still debated whether this was literally enacted or just staged to create maximum shock value. But either way, it was a spectacle born from a morbid fascination with the profane. These fatal charades, as one historian calls them, were the ultimate expression of the Roman obsession with spectacle, repackaging a human's final agonising moments into a twisted story for the masses. If being torn apart by beasts or dying in a twisted mythological play wasn't horrific enough, the Romans also devised a more elemental form of terror: death by fire. Known as vivi crematio, this method often employed a special diabolical piece of clothing called the tunica molesta, the annoying shirt. This was a tunic or shirt coated in highly flammable materials like pitch, resin or oil. The condemned person was forced to wear it, their neck often fixed to a stake, effectively being turned into a human candle, designed for maximum agony and a slow, visually dramatic burn. Once lit, the garment would burn with an infernal intensity, sticking to the skin and causing unimaginable, unrelenting pain as it melted and fused with the flesh. This execution was sometimes part of the mythological reenactments, as with the man playing Hercules being burned on his pyre, but often it was used for pure, unadulterated shock value. Emperor Nero famously used this method on a mass scale against Christians after the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. According to historians Tacitus, Nero had them rounded up, covered in pitch, and burned at night in his imperial gardens. He used their flaming, screaming bodies as grotesque living lanterns to light up his private parties, even mingling with the crowd dressed as a charioteer, While this specific event happened outside the public arena, the tunica molesta was certainly a staple of the game's toolkit for execution. It was a spectacle that assaulted multiple senses: the horrifying sight of the living flames, the acrid smell of burning pitch and flesh, and the ghastly sound of victims suffering. It was a slow, visually dramatic death that captivated the audience through its sheer monstrous cruelty. The Roman arena was an engineering marvel, but its primary purpose was to create ever more elaborate ways to kill and to entertain. Under the floor of the Colosseum lay the Hypogeum, a complex two-storey network of tunnels, chambers, animal pens and elevators. This subterranean maze was the hidden engine of the show, operating like a deadly, large-scale jack-in-the-box. Using a sophisticated system of pulleys, ropes and capstans operated by hundreds of slaves, dozens of elevators could simultaneously hoist animals, scenery and people into the arena through hidden trapdoors, creating shocking, sudden surprises for the audience. A peaceful forest scene could suddenly have a lion burst from a hidden door in the set. A gladiator could find himself instantly surrounded by a pack of bears that appeared as if from nowhere. The machinery allowed for bizarre and uniquely grand spectacles. In the Colosseum's very earliest years, before the Hypogeum was fully built out, the entire arena floor could be flooded with millions of gallons of water to stage naumachia, or mock naval battles. These were massive, expensive productions involving thousands of prisoners and specially built, scaled-down warships reenacting famous sea battles from history. The fighters, often criminals or prisoners of war who had been condemned to die, fought to the death in the flooded arenas, a real-life game of battleship, where the sinking ships were filled with screaming, drowning people. The theatricality didn't even stop where the victims were dead. Attendants would walk into the blood-soaked sand to confirm the deaths, but they did so in costume. One was dressed as Charon, the mythical ferryman of the underworld, who would symbolically hammer the skulls of the fallen to ensure they were truly gone. Another, dressed as the god Mercury, would touch a red-hot iron to the bodies to make sure no one was merely faking death to escape. This final grim ritual was like a stage crew cleaning up after a particularly bloody play, reminding everyone that from start to finish, this was a carefully managed and brutally orchestrated production of death. It's hard to look away from the sheer calculated darkness of these spectacles, and it reveals so much about a society we often choose to glorify. If this deep dive into history's shadow side taught you something new and shocking today, hit that like button to help us bring these hidden histories to more people. And let us know in the comments which of these horrifying acts do you find the most unbelievable. From men torn apart by beasts for midday entertainment to living myths that ended in real death, the Roman arena was a place where the boundaries of cruelty were constantly and creatively pushed for the sake of entertainment. It wasn't just about random violence, it was about spectacle, power and absolute control. These elaborate productions demonstrated Rome's dominion over nature by importing exotic animals from the farthest corners of the empire just to kill them. It showed Rome's dominion over its enemies by executing them in the most public and degrading ways imaginable. And it even showed Rome's dominion over mythology itself by twisting sacred stories into scripts for murder. It forces us to ask an uncomfortable question. How did an entire civilization that produced brilliant philosophy, law and art also become so utterly desensitized to human suffering? What does it say about a society when its most popular form of entertainment is watching real people die in increasingly creative ways? And maybe the most chilling thought is to ask what our own modern spectacles, from brutal reality TV to hyper-violent video games and the endless scroll of online tragedies, say about our own fascination with conflict and drama. The Colosseum may be a ruin, but the question it raises about human nature are as alive and unsettling as ever.